Welcome to the Safety Academy. Real quick, as we always do, an introduction of the webpage. The TampaBayTrafficSafety.com website is the location where we post all of the recordings and informations for upcoming webinars. There's a link over on the left under Education for the Safety Academy. This is the location where all the information is posted. If you scroll down through this page, there is a calendar of upcoming webinars, and a little bit further down there are the recordings, the PowerPoints for the webinars. Here's today's presentations already up there, and the recording will be posted, sometime after the recording actually takes place. Further down on the under the general resources, you'll see a PDH request form. This is for your professional development hours if you're a PE and you'd like to get some continuing education credits.
Anthony, your page is not showing, so.
My page is not showing.
It's just showing the beginning page you had.
Oh, I must have a lot of lag.
Okay.
Well, I mean, TampaBayTrafficSafety.com is the place to go, and there is a link for education on there. I'll try to show that again at the end to see if my if I don't have any lag. But I'll go ahead and switch it over to Dennis for his intro on the Academy itself.
Okay, before I do my introduction, I just want to welcome everybody to the 7th webinar for the 2015 Safety Academy. My name is Dennis Balloon. I'm a District 7 Safety Academy Coordinator and District 7 Consultant. And today's topic is Fletcher Avenue Bicyclist and Pedestrian Behavior Change. Formative Research Project, which will be presented today by Dr. Amy Lester and Julie Bond, MPA, both with the Center for Urban Transportation Research, USF, Tampa, Florida. So I'm going to kind of give you an introduction to the Academy. As I've always talked about, the Academy kind of highlights safety topics to your particular area to enhance your local safety programs. So that's the purpose of the Academy. This is the 3rd series of the webinars that District 7's put on. They start around 10 o'clock and end by 12 p.m., 2-hour window, and they're usually on Wednesdays. And this will probably end on December 16th unless we add any additional ones. And they go for about a minimum of an hour, but no more than 2 hours. And as Anthony just presented and discussed, there's a place to go register on the web page, which I'm reflecting there, and then also the web page itself to check out the presentations that have been presented. And as I mentioned today, Stephen Benson was going to present today, and today we've got Julie Bond and Dr. Amy Lester, who are from Qatar, and they're going to present on the Bicyclist and Pedestrian Behavior Change Formative Research Project for Fletcher Avenue. And also the sessions do get AICP-CM credits. They're in the process. And you also can get PDHs, and you just have to go through and submit it to Larry Hagan, Consultant Services, or you may fax it to this number here. And all this is on the web page, so I'm just kind of highlighting it here. And you get 1 PDH. And this is where you download the form, which is on the web page. And this is my contact information if you need any have any questions or need any assistance. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters, Julie Bond and Dr. Amy Lester.
Thank you very much, Anthony and Dennis. We're very happy to be here today. And this is Julie Bond speaking first. And we're going to present our research on the extent of changes in pedestrian and bicyclist attitudes and behaviors directly after a Complete Streets project in Florida. And the Complete Streets project that many of you have heard about for this research was Fletcher Avenue in Hillsborough County. And Fletcher Avenue is a county road. It's maintained by Hillsborough County, so this was a Hillsborough County project. Dr. Amy Lester is the lead for this research here at Cutter, and it was completed last month. Amy is a postdoctoral scholar at Cutter, and she received a PhD in social marketing from the University of Florida last year. And I'm Julie Bond. I'll co-present today with Dr. Lester. I'm a senior researcher at USF, and I'm also the project manager for Walkwise Tampa Bay that is providing education on Fletcher Avenue and on other targeted corridors. And Walkwise has been so successful, the Walkwise education, that it's expanding to other FDOT districts in the state. So we're excited about that. The objectives of the presentation today are as follows. You should be able to understand how the 3 E's, which are education, enforcement, and engineering, complement each other. We'll define complete streets. You'll learn how journey mapping is related to formative research and how that's utilized to understand that behavior change is very complex. Okay, a little bit about the project background. Now, this project focuses specifically on improving the understanding of attitudes and behaviors of the users of Fletcher Avenue, and it's from Nebraska Avenue to Bruce B. Downs Boulevard. I know many of you have driven along that corridor. And the research was to complement infrastructure investments that Hillsborough County implemented to reduce pedestrian and bicyclist crashes and to make the corridor more user-friendly. This corridor has been identified by county and state transportation professionals as having one of the highest pedestrian crash rates in unincorporated Hillsborough County, and more than 1,400 pedestrians cross Fletcher Avenue each day. A high percentage live within 1/2 mile of the corridor. Between 2009 and 2014, there were 113 pedestrian and bicyclist crashes in this section of Fletcher Avenue, of which 31 resulted in incapacitating injuries and 6 resulted in fatalities. Next, we're going to show you a video clip, and we'll bring that up. And the video clip, we hope, just gives you, those of you who are across the state, just provide you with images of Fletcher Avenue and help you understand the environment in a visual context as we present the presentation. So here is the video clip.
It's lunchtime here on Fletcher Avenue, one of the busiest times of the day. It's also a time for people crossing the street to pay close attention. It's scary, you never want to see nobody get hit by a car. I wouldn't want to walk on this road. It's quite dangerous. Felicia Wallace knows the dangers firsthand. She walks Fletcher every day and was almost hit by a driver a couple weeks ago. My time was trying to cross, he was trying to already zoom out, so almost hit his mirror, to be exactly, almost hit his mirror. So it was one of those scary experiences. To cut down on those experiences, Hillsborough County's Public Works Department is spending $4 million in state and federal funds to revamp the 1.5 mile area between Fletcher and Bruce B. Downs. The county recently released these designs highlighting the additions. They're going to install median islands on the road, new bike lanes, and more sidewalks. So we're going to try everything we can do to bring them to safe crossing points along the roadway so that they can cross safely. I personally think it's a good idea. It'll make things a lot safer around here. And safety is the bottom line. After 63 pedestrian-involved accidents between 2006 and 2010, 3 people died in those crashes.
Okay, we hope that helped give you a little bit of a visual context. Okay, so moving along, we wanted to define complete streets, and I'm sure many of you have heard about this, and even you may be working on design for complete streets, or you may use a complete street in your area. However, we wanted to define complete streets for you. And this is a definition from Smart Growth America, and they define a complete street as a street for everyone. They're designed and operated to enable safe access for all users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. Complete streets make it easy to cross the street, walk to shops, and bicycle to work. They allow buses to run on time and make it safe for people to walk to and from train stations. So that is a definition from Smart Growth America. Okay, so Hillsborough County implemented the following list in their Complete Streets project for Fletcher Avenue to make you a little more familiar with what happened. There are 5 mid-block pedestrian crossings incorporating the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, the RRFBs, 1 mid-block pedestrian crossing with a traffic signal that's located by Walmart where there is heavy pedestrian traffic, raised concrete pedestrian refuge islands, raised concrete traffic separators, bike lanes were included, energy efficient LED street lighting, which is very important, enhanced landscaping. There's some great plants and great landscaping enhancing the visual aspects of the streets for pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers. And also the speed limit was lowered from 45 to 35 miles per hour. And this is a rendering of the project, so you can see what that looked like. Pedestrian safety was the focus of the Fletcher Avenue upgrade. And okay, we're going to play a second video for you on this slide. It's an after video, and so we'll get this up on the screen for you.
Keeping you safe on the most dangerous intersections in Hillsborough County is getting a safety makeover. Ashley York is on Fletcher Avenue between Brewsby Downs and Livingston, where about 1,400 pedestrians cross every day. Good afternoon, Ashley.
Well, crossing could get easier. Take a look. Right now you can see those yellow flashing lights on the new crosswalk, but I expect it to be fully operational within about an hour. But let me tell you, there are mixed feelings out here about the addition of this median. Cars fly down Fletcher Avenue.
Cars barely slow down for the pedestrians when they're supposed to.
And crossing is daunting for Nelsie Vargas with little ones in tow. So for Vargas, the new walkway is welcome between Brewsby Downs Boulevard and Livingston Avenue on Fletcher.
It makes me feel that actually they're starting to care about walkers. You know, we're actually going to be able to walk and have, you know, our time to be able to cross the street without having cars just coming.
But will the 6 crossings added to this area to the tune of $5 million actually make a difference? Bagels Plus owner Steve Aziz is waiting to see.
I can see that they help people safe. But not much. You know, because people has a habit. They don't change.
He says business owners here don't like the median because now cars can't access shops on both sides of the street. Aziz has been watching people cross Fletcher for years and says pedestrians need to actually use the crosswalk.
Now, still, they don't come to that. This is a light. They still cross everywhere.
And LATSA habit authorities are hoping to change. At least 3 people have been killed in this area since 2006. Now, those other 5 crosswalks in the area are expected to be up and running by Thursday. Reporting near USF campus, I'm Ashley York, ABC Action News.
Okay, hopefully that gave you a little bit of more visual context too. Okay, and I did want to mention on Fletcher there was a triple E approach that we've been working with before and after the Complete Streets. The triple E approach is consistently used on Fletcher Avenue, and enforcement comes from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Education through Walkwise Tampa Bay. We do presentations, we do what we call sweeps. We go along the streets and we drop off information to business owners and leave information for people regarding the new Complete Streets project and information on pedestrian safety. And Walkwise Tampa Bay is funded through FDOT District 7, and the engineering project, of course, was through Hillsborough County. Okay, so moving along to our research project. Now, I just want to mention the purpose of our research on Fletcher Avenue was not to count or monitor crashes or to conduct a before and after of fatalities related to the corridor. Our purpose was to study perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors of walking, biking, and safety along Fletcher Avenue to see if attitudes and behaviors changed directly after the completion of the Complete Streets. And also, it was to determine the most effective way to educate the users of Fletcher Avenue, and that is all users. and our research objectives. The project served as a formative research phase, and you'll hear more about this from Dr. Lester, of a community-based social marketing approach to increase the proper use of the pedestrian crosswalks along Fletcher Avenue between Nebraska and Bruce Downs Boulevard. The foundation of a community-based social marketing is a customer orientation, so it's in which information is sought to better understand the people being served. Consumer research is designed and conducted to gain a rich understanding of a priority audience's needs, wants, values, motivators, and barriers in everyday lives. So formative research with individuals who regularly cross Fletcher Avenue was used to clarify, as you can see on this slide, how individuals currently cross Fletcher Avenue, so their current behavior, the willingness of individuals to properly use the crosswalks, opinions about crosswalks, including motivators and barriers to using crosswalks, a cost benefit, barriers individuals experience related to not properly using the crosswalks, and that they would like to overcome, and the marketing channels that individuals would respond to best. So those are our project objectives. So now I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Lester, and she's going to talk about our research and give you an insight into what happened on Fletcher as we conducted the research. Amy?
Great, thanks, Julie. So I'm going to go over first a little bit of the methodology we used for this research project. So first, pedestrian and bicyclist observations, on-the-spot surveys, journey mapping, and intercept interviews were used to study, again, the perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors of walking, biking, and safety along Fletcher Avenue. The observational data was collected during August 2014 and again during February 2015. And these months correspond to during the construction of and after the completion of the Fletcher Avenue Complete Streets project along this corridor. So pedestrians and bicyclists crossing at 4 signalized intersections along the Fletcher Avenue corridor were observed. And this was for a total of 16 hours for each of these months. So each intersection was observed in 2-hour increments at differing times and on differing days of the week to capture varying pedestrian and bicyclist behaviors. And the days and times of the observations at each intersection were identical, both during August 2014 and February 2015. And we used a standardized observation form so that everything was collected consistently. And it records pedestrian and bicyclist behavior. We include items such as mode, direction of travel, crosswalk usage, distraction, helmet use, and travel behavior. Next, on-the-spot surveys were conducted with pedestrians and bicyclists along Fletcher Avenue again during August 2014 and February 2015, and these time points were the same as the observational data. So individuals who were observed crossing Fletcher Avenue at or near one of those 4 signalized intersections were then asked to complete a brief on-the-spot survey regarding their reasons for traveling on Fletcher Avenue, their perceptions of safety, and reasons for not using the crosswalks. And as with the observations, the days and times of the on-the-spot surveys were identical during those 2 months. In January of 2015, the research team conducted a journey map to better understand what it's like to use Fletcher Avenue as a pedestrian. And this activity was undertaken just as the Fletcher Avenue Complete Streets project was coming to completion to get a feel for the new infrastructure that we're encouraging individuals to use properly. And then finally, using the results from the observations and on-the-spot surveys and journey mapping, we developed an in-depth interview guide to better understand individuals' perceptions, wants and needs, motivators, barriers, to properly using the crosswalks and bike lanes. And during March and April of 2015, intercept interviews were conducted with individuals walking or biking along Fletcher Avenue. And we asked them items such as their knowledge of pedestrian and bicycle safety and laws, their willingness to properly use the crosswalks and bike lanes, preferred format for obtaining information, etc. For inclusion, participants were at least 18 years of age and they travel regularly on the stretch of Fletcher Avenue by bicycle, wheelchair, or foot. Each interview lasted about 10 to 15 minutes. It took place on the sidewalks or in a nearby shaded parking lot, wherever was convenient for the participant. And all participants received a reflective bag with information about the newly installed rectangular rapid flashing beacons and a $10 retail gift card. So we have included several poll questions in today's presentation, and these questions are some of the same questions that were used for the on-the-spot surveys that were conducted before and after the completion of the Complete Streets project. So the first question is, do you have access to a vehicle to use regularly?
We're going to go ahead and launch that as a poll, so the audience will actually be able to answer the question. Give everybody a few minutes to answer those.
Thanks, Anthony.
I like polls to make sure that the audience is awake here. It's good. It's like, oh, I got an interactive presentation. All right, we've got about 75% of the people have voted. Let's go ahead and close that and show the responses. So 100% of our audience has regular access to vehicle use.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for participating. So yes, it looks like 100% of people have regular access to a vehicle. So this, we want to bring up on our next slide some of our characteristics of the sample population that we were working with. So in August of 2014, 867 individuals crossing at or near one of the 4 signalized intersections were observed. And then February 2015, we had a total of almost 1,200 individuals observed. In August 2014, 173 of the observed individuals completed the on-the-spot surveys. And in February 2015, we had 175 complete surveys. Additionally, 98 individuals participated in intercept interviews in March and April of 2015. And you can see there that most of our individuals were pedestrians. And then of the individuals surveyed and interviewed, most did not have regular access to a personal vehicle. And as Julie mentioned, lived within 1/2 mile of the Fletcher Avenue corridor. So as we saw in our recent poll, about 100% of the respondents have access to a regular vehicle, where the population that we're working with on Fletcher Avenue, about 30% have access to a regular vehicle. So their mode really is walking, biking, and transit for the most part. So a little more about our observational data. So of the 867 individuals observed in August of 2014 during the construction of the Fletcher Avenue Complete Streets project, most individuals crossed the street using a crosswalk, as you can see in those figures there. However, less than half of these individuals crossed while the pedestrian signal was white, indicating that it was the appropriate time to cross. And less than half also pressed this crosswalk signal button before crossing. Additionally, nearly 1/5 of individuals were observed to be distracted while crossing, such as talking or texting on a cell phone or looking in another direction. After the completion of the Fletcher Avenue Complete Streets project, a slightly lower percentage of individuals were observed crossing the street using a crosswalk. However, the percentage of these individuals crossing while the pedestrian signal is white, as well as pushing the crosswalk signal button, increased slightly. Additionally, the percentage of individuals who were observed to be distracted while crossing decreased also slightly by about 4 percentage points. And here are some pictures of some observations that we took while we were out on Fletcher Avenue. So just some pedestrians using the new infrastructure and some of the existing infrastructure as well. So in that first picture, you can see with the individuals crossing in one of the new crosswalks. This was just before they were operational. So you can see the infrastructure is there, but there are still some construction cones. But those are some people already using the new crosswalk, which was great to see. In that middle picture, that is a picture of the Walmart crossing. So that crosswalk was operational at the time of this picture. And you see somebody there who has pressed the pedestrian signal button and is waiting at the new signalized crosswalk. And then the last picture, you see somebody, this was one of the existing crosswalks, but you see an individual who's crossing a signalized crosswalk. However, she's crossing against the signal. So you can see that maybe possibly in the background, but the hand is red. It looks like it is a countdown, but the countdown is actually for the sign behind it for the gas station, but she was crossing on just a red hand signal. As far as our bicyclist observations, so in October 2014, 231 individuals were observed crossing Fletcher Avenue. Most were not wearing a bike helmet, and the largest majority was riding on the sidewalk. Of the 28 bicyclists riding on the street, so only 28 out of the 231 were on the street, more than half of these were riding correctly with traffic. And then after the completion of the Fletcher Avenue Complete Streets project in 2015, 269 individuals were observed crossing Fletcher Avenue on bike. Again, most were not wearing a bike helmet. The majority of bicyclists were again observed to be riding on the sidewalk, and only 51 bicyclists out of the 269 were on the street, and nearly all were riding with traffic out of those 51. And here's a couple examples of individuals that we saw riding on bikes along Fletcher Avenue. So you can see the first individual, well, in both individuals, neither one of them is wearing a helmet. And in the first picture, this individual is crossing against traffic at a signalized intersection. So he's crossing in the pedestrian crosswalk area. However, he does not have the crosswalk signal, and he's riding against traffic as well. And then the second one, you could see riding against traffic. And this is in one of the newly installed bike lanes that was part of the Complete Streets project. And you could see also the road signage there directing him that he's going in the wrong direction. So our second poll question for today to ask the audience is, again, one of our on-the-spot survey questions is, how often do you walk and bike in your community?
So Anthony, if you can bring the poll up. We'll give everyone just a few more seconds.
All right, we'll go ahead and close the poll. We've got about 75% people responding and sharing that response.
Thank you. Well, it looks like about 18% stated that they walk or bike in their community nearly every day, 22% a few times per week, about the same proportion, about once per week or 2-3 times per month, and the largest percentage, 35%, almost never. So next, to compare that to what we found for our on-the-spot surveys, again, looking at this population of Fletcher Avenue. So again, the vast majority of individuals surveyed do not have regular access to a car, as we shared previously. And then the largest percentage walks or bikes nearly every day or a few times per week. Again, in 2015, the vast majority of individuals do not have regular access to a car. They walk, bike nearly every day or a few times per week. So again, this is a population that is out using Fletcher Avenue daily or several times per week without access to a vehicle. So next, we asked individuals about the reason for traveling on Fletcher Avenue, and this was part of the on-the-spot surveys that were conducted in October and February. So results indicate that the majority of individuals were crossing Fletcher Avenue before the completion of the Complete Streets project to visit a retail location or to run errands. And the distribution of answers is viewable in that first pie chart. Examples of answers that were included in the other category include to go home, to visit or meet a family member, to go to a party, to go to a probation office, to find a driving course. And then after the completion of the Fletcher Avenue Complete Streets project, the majority of individuals were still crossing Fletcher Avenue to visit retail locations or to run errands. And examples of answers that were included in the other category include, again, to go home, to visit a friend or family member, to go to school, to pick up a vehicle, or to go fishing. So our third poll question, so what would cause you to not use a crosswalk? And choose the main reason below. Okay, we'll give everyone just a couple more seconds. Looks like most people have answered. Okay, great. So it looks like over half of respondents indicated that if the crosswalk was not located where they want to cross, that would be their main reason for not using a crosswalk, followed by 30% saying that they always use the crosswalk, and then smaller percentages say it takes too long for the traffic signal to change, or I feel safer crossing outside the crosswalk. Great, thank you, everyone. So now to compare that to what we saw out on Fletcher Avenue. So surprisingly, when asked what would cause individuals to not use a crosswalk, almost half of respondents or more than half, stated that I always use the crosswalk on Fletcher Avenue, which does correlate well with the observational data. However, almost half of respondents identified a barrier, such as it takes too long for the traffic signals to change, or that the crosswalks are not located where they want to cross. Okay, and our last poll question. So as a pedestrian or bicyclist, how safe do you feel crossing the street? Very safe, safe, unsafe, or very unsafe? Okay, it looks like most people have voted. Okay, so it looks like the response in our audience, 56% feel safe, and 41% feel unsafe, 3% very unsafe. So quite a difference in the feelings of safety. And now to compare that with what we saw out on Fletcher Avenue. So again, these were the on-the-spot surveys. So before completion in October 2014, when survey respondents were asked how safe they feel crossing Fletcher Avenue, approximately 2/5 of respondents reported feeling unsafe or very unsafe. Again, this was before the completion of the Complete Streets project. After the completion of the Complete Streets project, the percentage of respondents who reported feeling unsafe or very unsafe increased slightly, as shown in these figures. So after completion, a slightly larger percentage reported feeling unsafe or very unsafe along Fletcher Avenue.
Okay, this is Julie, and I'm going to take you through a journey mapping process. So to improve services as public agencies, we really have to understand what matters to our customers and how experiences are perceived and remembered. So for this research, we looked at the customers who were the users of Fletcher Avenue, specifically the pedestrians. And for this journey map experience, we took a walk in their shoes. And Amy and I did walk the corridor, multiple times, many times. We were out on the streets doing the interviews. And next, we're going to take you through one of our walking experiences down Fletcher Avenue. Okay, so first we started at Walmart, which is, for those of you who aren't that familiar with Fletcher, it is close to Bruce B. Downs. And we started at the Walmart and we walked round trip along Fletcher Avenue to Revere Landings Apartments and then back. So it will take you on our journey. So first we crossed at the new signalized crossing and we pushed the button, which you can see in the photo, which had a really nice explanation of what we should do. So we felt confident that we could cross the street safely. However, what we experienced was we waited about 2.5 to 3 minutes before we could cross. So as a pedestrian, that can feel like a long time when you're standing there waiting to cross the street and you have pushed the button. So when we were legally allowed to cross, we did, and we crossed the street, walked by the Bagels Plus. You saw the owner in one of the videos that we played, and we did meet him several times on our journeys. So as we walked, we witnessed a lot of different driver behavior, and you can see some here in this photo. So such as blocking the sidewalk in multiple locations, as they pulled out of driveways to access Fletcher Avenue from retail locations. There are a lot of driveways, a lot of retail along Fletcher, so this is something that we encountered. So what would you do here? You know, we were faced with the decision on should we cross behind the car or should we cross in front of the car? So pedestrians must make many decisions, not always obvious, as we walk along the street. As we walked, we saw lots of nice new signs along the way. You can see this one. It's alerting drivers of where they need to stop for pedestrians. We walked by bus stops. You can see a Metro Rapid stop. Most often there were people at the bus stops. For some reason, when we took this photo, there weren't. But we also noticed when the bus stopped, many people crossed mid-block near the stops instead of going down to the new crosswalks or signalized crossings because they were a little bit of distance. So we witnessed most people would get off the bus and then cross at the most convenient location, which wasn't always a crosswalk. Then we stood here, we waited for the signal to change as we were being very law-abiding, so we waited, and you could see the people on the other side, they passed by us and crossed against the red signal, but they made it safely across. So finally the signal changed and we walked and made it to the other side safely. We noticed some interesting things. We crossed at the new mid-block crossings, which was a good experience, and we did hear a few people, for example, commenting about the limited visibilities to see cars approaching. You can see from these photos if you push the button and go over and stand there, you may not be able to have as a great a visibility as you would like as a pedestrian. The flashing beacons, we pushed the buttons, the beacons flashed. The experience of crossing with the flashing yellow lights was overall good. Most of the cars stopped each time. You know, once in a while there were a few cars who wouldn't, but as pedestrians we were very aware of our surroundings, and most of the cars did stop when the beacons were flashing. There are these really great sidewalk messages that Hillsborough County implemented right there where you cross. So you look down, they're powerful, they're visually appearing, and we did like to look at that. They were fun to look at and read as we stood there and waited, and they tell us again the importance of pushing the button to make the lights turn on as you're crossing those mid-block crossings. Also, signage in the streets. We noticed as pedestrians these kind of large, low signs on the sidewalks alerting cars to the next street name. So those were interesting as pedestrians. We did notice a driver behavior again. The pedestrian signal signage is very easy to read. We like that, and you can understand what they're saying. When you push them, there's the audio voice giving you more instruction, which is nice. However, we witnessed a lot of drivers blocking our crossing, and a lot of drivers just seemed inattentive, so that's something we experienced as a pedestrian. So, in conclusion, along the way, we learned what our customers, who are pedestrians, experience firsthand while walking along Fletcher, everyone was really very friendly, and overall we had a great experience, but we did learn things that we wouldn't if we had never walked down Fletcher and walked in their shoes. So finally, this is a worksheet you can complete if you determine you want to do journey mapping when you're starting a new project and trying to figure out what's best for your customer. And so you can check whether it was positive, neutral, or negative. You can see here we documented some of our feelings. And then you can, at the bottom, you can put some thoughts on what are some improvements or what are opportunities that we learned as we took the emotional experience down Fletcher Avenue. So this is really a good exercise to do. We recommend it for everyone who is working on a street. If you haven't walked down that street, please do so, and you might have a different perspective on what needs to happen for the pedestrians, and it's great to talk to everyone using the street. Those are our customers. Okay, Amy, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, great, thanks. So next, I'm going to talk about the intercept interviews that we conducted. So again, these were conducted in March and April of 2015 after the Complete Streets completion. So we used all of the data that we found in the previous observations, on-the-spot surveys, and journey mapping to really formulate some questions that we could ask individuals on the street. And these were open-ended questions. So we asked them very conversationally, asking them what their perceptions were of the barriers, motivators, safety on Fletcher Avenue, things such as that. So we had 98 participants complete our on-the-spot interviews. These took, again, about 15 minutes apiece. We had 83 people walking, 14 bicyclists stopped to talk with us, and one gentleman who was in a wheelchair. From our in-depth interviews, about 67% stated that they have no access to a regular vehicle. 85% of them walk daily or several times per week on Fletcher Avenue, and more than half live within a half-mile of Fletcher Avenue, including 8 participants who were homeless. So just a little bit about our interviewees. So most were male, almost 3/4, and the average age was 42, about 42 and a half years old. And this table just shows the dispersion of ages of our interviewees. Okay, so when asked about the reasons why people walk and bike on Fletcher Avenue, the most common reason given by more than half of respondents was to go shopping. And people frequently identified shopping locations such as the Walmart, Aldi, and Target, as well as other grocery stores and businesses. 1/4 of respondents stated that people walk and bike because they do not own or do not have access to a personal vehicle. And then nearly 1/5 of respondents reported people walking and biking for health reasons, such as to get physical activity or the strategy to lower blood pressure, for example. Other less common answers include because it's convenient, to get to a bus stop, to get to restaurants, for leisure, pleasure, to get to work, school, save money, to visit medical facilities, and to visit friends and family. And a lot of these are included in that other category. And then this figure depicts the distribution of these responses received. The respondents were then asked to discuss whether they felt safe walking or biking along Fletcher Avenue. While more than half stated that they feel safe on Fletcher Avenue, 45 of the 98 people reported to feel unsafe at least part of the time when they are walking or biking on Fletcher Avenue. Only a handful of individuals who feel unsafe discussed issues related to crime, and the overwhelmingly majority of individuals who feel unsafe on Fletcher Avenue attributed their feelings to traffic-related issues, such as too much traffic, drivers not watching or stopping for pedestrians, and people driving recklessly. And as a secondary question, we asked participants to discuss how safe they feel while using the crosswalks on Fletcher Avenue, including the newly installed crosswalks with the RRSBs. Again, about half of the response indicated that they feel safe while using the crosswalks, and then half responded that they feel unsafe at least part of the time. And individuals who elaborated on why they feel unsafe identified issues such as vehicles not yielding at the crosswalks, previous crash experiences by themselves or a family member, distracted drivers, turning vehicles at the intersections, vehicle speeding, low visibility in the crosswalks, especially at night, and issues with the crosswalk signals not working properly. And then as stated by several participants, I put a couple quotes up on the screen. And then this is a photo of the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and you can see in this photo here that there's somebody in the crosswalk. It's hard to see, but the light is blinking. The gentleman is in the crosswalk, and you can see cars on both sides of the street were stopping, which was nice to see. So when asked what types of things a person can do to ensure that they stay safe while walking or biking on Fletcher Avenue, nearly half of individuals discuss the importance of staying alert and aware of their surroundings. For example, as stated by some participants, look before you cross, be very careful, and watch for cars because they don't stop. Be cautious, look both ways, and take a second look. And pay attention to surroundings, be aware. Just because you're paying attention doesn't mean others are. Many participants also discuss the importance of staying on the sidewalks while walking and using crosswalks and following the crosswalk signals when needing to cross the street. And then other less common responses include providing more driver education to vehicle drivers, appropriate gear such as bike lights, helmets, bright colored clothing, not walking alone also. And then here's the image of the Fletcher Avenue signalized intersection. And this is an image at Bruce B. Downs in Fletcher. So this was at the east end of the Fletcher Avenue corridor that we were studying. Next, response were asked to identify characteristics of the people who they see using crosswalks along Fletcher Avenue. Almost half the response characterized people who use crosswalks as families with children and elderly or older adults. And answers such as elderly are more careful than young teens, and older, more mature persons, children with families, and parents with children use crosswalks. And then other common answers include women, individuals who are disabled or in wheelchairs, and people in groups. Very few respondents identified men or younger individuals as people they see using crosswalks along Fletcher Avenue. As a follow-up question, respondents were asked what characteristics describe individuals who do not use crosswalks, the overwhelming majority of which identified young males as those who do not use crosswalks. And a couple of the examples are up there on your screen. So response were asked to discuss reasons why people on Fletcher Avenue do not use crosswalks, and we are very careful to ask this question in such a way that people did not answer about themselves. So as you could see from the on-the-spot surveys, most indicated that they always use the crosswalks. So we wanted to hear why others don't use crosswalks to possibly get more reasons from people. So more than a third of individuals discussed people being impatient or in a hurry as a reason people do not use crosswalks when crossing Fletcher Avenue. And they provide responses such as they're too busy trying to get where they need to go, or they're in a rush, or they see it if it's clear and they just cross. Related to people being impatient and in a hurry, the next most commonly received response was that the crosswalks are not located in convenient locations. And then other common responses were that people did not perceive the crosswalks to be safe, and that people either did not know the rules or did not care about them enough to use the crosswalks. And again, this was related to people being impatient or in a hurry. Again, the second most commonly received response was that the crosswalks are not located in convenient locations. For instance, some people said it's not as convenient to walk to the crosswalk. This is the only reason I can think of why someone would avoid safety. And lack of convenience. When trying to get to the Family Dollar and the laundromat, there's no crosswalk nearby. And then this is the image of that intersection that a lot of people were discussing with the Family Dollar intersection. And this is the corner of Fletcher and 19th. So this is a four-way intersection where people can legally cross. However, there is no crosswalk here. And people stated that a lot of people are using this intersection. There's residential houses on both sides of 19th Street, and there's a lot of locations such as the Family Dollar and the laundromat that people are walking to. Okay, when individuals are asked what they thought may motivate people to use crosswalks more often, over 1/4 of individuals discussed police presence or police issuing citations as a motivator that may encourage people who do not currently use crosswalks to use the crosswalks more often. And again, this is part of the 3 E's. And then other common responses include built environment changes, such as installing more crosswalks, changing the color of the rapid flashing beacons from yellow to red, installing more signage to alert drivers of new crosswalks and their responsibility to yield to pedestrians, decreasing the wait time for the pedestrian signals to change at signalized intersections, and adding more bus stops near the existing crosswalks. Individuals also discussed the need for more education and marketing campaigns to encourage people to use the crosswalks properly. And then this is another image of one of the new mid-block crossings that we used and that many people were discussing. So finally, talking about safe walking and biking, when interview participants were asked where they would look for information if they wanted to learn more about safe walking and bicycling, the most common response was to look online. And then other common answers was to talk to people such as law enforcement, on-the-street ambassadors, local residents, family members, and crossing guards. Overwhelmingly, the majority of people mentioned some form of face-to-face interaction, and a large proportion of these individuals recommend some type of on-the-street ambassador to talk about safe walking and biking. So example of responses included are on your screen, such as outreach, public outreach by walking the streets and open promotion. And people said things like what you are doing out here now, talking, walking by the same people every day. And again, do what you're doing. Give out safety items, vests, and lights. They also recommend the use of print materials and incentives to help engage people to stop and talk with ambassadors. And then other ideas for face-to-face interactions include listening to information presented at community meetings or schools, churches, special events, things such as that. And then lastly, interview participants were asked to discuss who would they trust to talk to about safe walking and biking. The largest proportion of people responded that they would trust the information received from a police officer. And other common responses include family members, friends, pastors, and people like themselves. And then this is an example of the Fletcher Avenue safety brochure that was developed by Hillsborough County. And this gives information about the newly installed rectangular rapid flashing beacons and how to use them. And this was some of the information that we gave out to participants during the in-depth interviews, and that they really appreciated and asked for more of. So in conclusion, the findings of this research provide support for the concept that although important built environment improvements by themselves do not necessarily change pedestrian and bicyclist behaviors. So we found that dangerous behaviors continue to exist directly after the completion of a Complete Streets project despite infrastructure improvements that were intended to influence behavior change. So for example, although 6 additional state-of-the-art pedestrian crosswalks were installed along Fletcher Avenue, the observational data showed that a slightly larger percentage of pedestrians crossed the street outside of the marked crosswalk after the completion of the project. Additionally, many of the behaviors that improved after the completion of the complete project, such as waiting for the crosswalk signal to change before crossing, properly using the crosswalk signal button, and biking in the designated bike lanes rather than on the sidewalk, did so only incrementally. So to influence behavior change, we found that it's important to completely understand the problem and identify what the important barriers are that people are facing. So we can then tailor educational messages and strategies to complement these built environment investments to influence positive pedestrian and bicyclist behaviors. So the findings from this study provide valuable data concerning the behaviors, barriers, and motivators of pedestrians and bicyclists who are the regular users of Fletcher Avenue. So for example, when interview participants were asked what the best way to talk with people about safe walking and biking would be, the largest majority recommended some form of street-level communication. And then we can take this recommendation and translate it to practice with on-the-street education ambassadors and walkways present on Fletcher Avenue to talk with people about their behaviors, encourage them to use the street safely, and demonstrate how to properly use the crosswalks and bike lanes. And just lastly, it is important to consider the role of individual attitudes, such as perceptions of personal safety and what impact these have on behavior change. And this study really highlights the importance of continued education after complete streets are in place, as there's still more work to be done often to change attitudes and ultimately impact the behaviors that we're seeking to change.
Okay, so that ends our presentation, and we are going to open up, I guess, Anthony, to questions.
Yeah, we've got a few questions in the chat. I believe over at your end you should be able to pull this up and see them as well. Back from earlier on, talking about the reduction of the speed limit on Fletcher based on the 85th percentile speed, or is it just an attempt to slow speeds for pedestrians, the change in speed on Fletcher? You know what,
That would be something Hillsborough County would have to answer. Amy, did you have anything on that?
No.
When we listed the what Hillsborough County implemented in their complete streets, that was they did lower the speed limit, but we'll have to check on the reasoning behind that to answer that question.
Okay, so we'll get back to the audience on that one and post our answers perhaps. Talking about level of service, the addition of the 6 crossings, what has that done to the level of service through the corridor?
As far as the figures for the level of service, I don't think we have those figures yet from Hillsborough County as far as how many more pedestrians are using Fletcher Avenue.
Yeah, and again, what we were studying was the behavior. And again, we mentioned that Hillsborough County came in and did the complete streets, but our research was with the pedestrians on the street, looking at behavior change and doing our formative research through the pedestrians. So we're part of the education component, and I know it looks like a lot of these questions are something that might be better suited for us to ask Hillsborough County, because I don't want to give you the incorrect answer to that.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the level of service also, they just mean the vehicular. I know that as a driver in the area, you definitely stop more than you used to along Fletcher Avenue. I mean, because there are 6 crossings and there is quite a bit of activity going through there. So, I mean, I know that it has probably affected level of service negatively. I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I mean, it's certainly safer. You know, that the crashes are down, so you know, things and compliance is up, and you know, all the positive things that you mentioned in your presentation. So it's one of those balancing acts between capacity and safety that we're always trying to play.
Exactly. Yeah, and we can post those answers specifically later so that we have a good answer for you from Hillsborough County on the level of service.
There's a question about sort of the whole community and the area. Has this caused commuters to alter their driving habits to avoid this section of Fletcher and increase travel on adjacent roadways such as Bush Boulevard or Bears Avenue? This person is assuming that the level of service is so adversely affected that drivers are just avoiding it altogether. Has anybody considered looking at volumes on adjacent roadways?
I know that that's something that is in the works for next year, that Hillsborough County is going to conduct a before and after study, and all those questions will most likely be answered. And you know, as we talk to people, you know, we heard some people saying, yeah, they think people had changed their habits, but as far as doing specific research on, you know, if people change those driving habits, this study did not look into that, so I can't answer that again specifically.
Then a question about the some of the pie charts that you had with the safe and unsafe crossing experience. Could the increase in percentage of persons reporting they feel unsafe crossing be attributed to recent crashes, or if the person knows others who have been involved in crashes?
Absolutely. We had several people during our in-depth interviews, for sure. On the spot surveys, we did not ask. We did not, you know, those were just fill in our multiple choice, so they did not elaborate on why they chose safe or unsafe. So we don't have additional data for those specific figures. But as far as the in-depth interviews, many individuals talked about prior crash experiences either with themselves or with individuals, relatives, family members that they knew of, and that definitely decreased their feelings or perceptions of safety. We interviewed one gentleman who had even been involved in a crash recently himself. So, and what he was speaking of, he was in a group of 4 or 5 other individuals, and it definitely changed the perception of the entire group of how safe they felt on Fletcher Avenue. So absolutely, prior crash experiences plays into their feelings of safety.
The survey, is that, are you able to make that available for others to see and perhaps use in other corridors? The questionnaire, I guess, the survey that you were doing?
Definitely. Yep, we can absolutely have the survey available. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you have it available on your site anywhere, but if you send me an email of it, I can add it to the resources for the Safety Academy webpage.
Sure. This was research that, as we stated, was just recently completed, and we have finalized the final report just in the last month. But we will get to you, Anthony, to post the results and other items that the audience would like to look at, this presentation and so forth.
Okay, great. Question about crash data. I don't know if you guys have looked at any details with crash data post, but does the crash data involving pedestrians and bicyclists show that it is higher in the crosswalks or outside of the crosswalks, and by what %?
I'm not sure if they mean crosswalks in general or the new crosswalks. And there is crash data available on that corridor, and it is mixed. So I don't have the exact percentage, but again, we can get those statistics for you. And again, this is all relatively new. If they're talking about the crosswalks with the flashing beacons, as you can see, the project is new, and when they do some of the additional studies to look at any trends, that will probably be done next year.
Yeah, I feel like I should know the number to that off the top of my head, because we read enough crash reports over here doing safety studies for the district. But I do know that there is a fairly high percentage of crashes that are outside of the crosswalk. And what this project has done, and what you've seen with some of your observations, is that there is a higher compliance of crosswalk usage along this corridor now, because there's more crosswalks and they're protected with the RRFBs. So I suspect that the number of pedestrian crashes along this corridor, after a couple of years of, because typically you do a before and after, and it's a few years out before you can really get a full enough data set, especially with something like pedestrian crashes, which have a much lower frequency. You need a larger sample size to definitively have a before and after study. But I suspect that the number of crashes are going to go down at this corridor, if nothing else, because of the compliance of pedestrians actually using that crosswalk.
Yes, exactly. And again, the next steps of this research are to look at, tailoring an education campaign that is targeted and that is going to provide the education that is needed along the corridor based on our findings.
There's a question about the actual operation. Is it split, or is it a two-stage crossing? The pedestrians, when they push the button, cars stop in both directions, or they first cross one and then come over and push, and then they cross the other leg?
It's actually when they push the button on one side of the street, the lights flash for all 4 lanes of traffic. So there is
all directions.
Yeah, there is another button that is located in the middle of the crosswalk in case somebody only crosses the 2 lanes, I'm assuming, and then needs to take, in that refuge island and take a break. Then they can press the button again, but the button in the middle is, again, going to stop all 4 lanes of traffic. So they can do it in segments, or they can cross all 4 lanes at once by only hitting the button on one side of the road.
And the middle push button would also stop traffic in all 4 lanes?
It does, correct.
Question about enforcement. That there was very little discussed during the presentation about enforcement. How do we get that to be a greater component of the discussion? Is the question in the chat.
I mean, this presentation focused on the education aspects, so that could be a whole other presentation. There was enforcement efforts, and Hillsborough County Sheriff is very actively involved along that corridor. So there is a really good enforcement effort going on that just wasn't included in this presentation because we just focused on our research and the education component. But the 3 E's, as you can see, did work together. We had Hillsborough County doing the engineering along with FDOT District 7, and then enforcement was involved. But this specific presentation, the research that Amy and I conducted was focused on the education component. So just because it wasn't included in this specific presentation does not mean it didn't happen. Enforcement was very much involved.
Yeah, definitely. I want to echo what you said. I mean, this was an effort from all of the disciplines involved that were working on this project, and absolutely. I mean, your presentation was on what you guys researched, but yeah, I mean, there was a huge component just from the education side. I mean, using the enforcement officers, handing out flyers and letting people know and giving out warnings and making sure that educating the drivers and the pedestrians about where to stop and the compliance. And so I mean, it was I think it's part of the reason why the driver compliance is so high is because of that enforcement component.
And we did hear from a lot of the pedestrians we spoke to and bicyclists. They talked about the enforcement efforts. They talked about talking to police officers and what that meant to them. So that we did hear about that through this research.
How was it decided to go with both overhead and post-mounted rectangular rapid flashing beacons?
Again, that would probably be better answered, I apologize, from Hillsborough County. That wasn't part of our research, and I wouldn't want to answer for them on their decision to do that engineering component. But again, Anthony, we can answer these afterwards via some emails and post these online since we're getting
it sounds like we're going to write a blog post about all the questions.
That might be another presentation.
I mean, I know that because of the levels, from an engineering standpoint, because of the levels of pedestrian activity along this corridor, and I mean, there's delivery trucks, and it's not necessarily a truck route, but I mean, there's larger vehicles that drive through this. It was believed that the compliance would be higher for pedestrians if it was overhead, I mean, for vehicles if it was overhead, because you could have a truck driving on the outside lane, and a vehicle on the inside lane would not see a post-mounted, the post-mounted RFB over on the shoulder. Additionally, also, I don't know if you mentioned it in the presentation or called that out, that overhead, what that does as well is illuminate the crosswalk. So it was a way not just to have the flashing lights up there, it also shines down on the crosswalk and illuminates it. Because again, the level of pedestrian activity through here is occurring both in the daytime and at nighttime. So that was a combination of increasing the visibility of the RFBs and also increasing the illumination of the crosswalk to reduce the number of nighttime crashes as well. So it was a combination of ideas that led to that particular design.
Yeah, they do seem very effective on that street because of the high pedestrian usage.
Hillsborough Avenue between Nebraska and 50th has recently been in the press for pedestrian injuries. Is this section in consideration for pedestrian crossings?
Yes, FDOT is installing the what is called a hawk, and so that is in the process right now. We are working with them as the education component once again. And so those are going to be, well, they are being installed right now. They are going to be active soon. And we are working, I can't comment again on all the engineering questions you may have, but we are going to be the education component on Hillsborough County. We have started that. We are doing a similar project here. We have gone out and done observations of pedestrians. And we've done surveys already, so kind of a look, and we are going to be doing a very enhanced walkways education campaign. We're giving presentations at all of the different high schools, at the different business locations. We're going out on the street and talking to people and giving them the information. There's a big media campaign also. So I can tell you for the education component that's happening, but as far as any engineering questions, that's probably would be better for DOT to answer on that. But they are not the they are the hawks, and Anthony, you might want to comment on those.
Yeah, the only thing to add to that is that I know that through CTST and other avenues, the department has entire coalitions dedicated to Hillsborough Avenue. So, you know, get involved if you're interested in being involved in those. CTST is a good community traffic safety team. CTST is a good place to go to and, you know, get involved and find out about some of these programs that are happening and some of the changes and voice concerns or opinions about some of the upcoming projects, and, you know, particularly from a safety standpoint, as this comment is. But I do know that they have a coalition dedicated to Hillsborough Avenue and, you know, doing improvements along that. Like you said, I mean, they are installing hawks at some of those locations. Yeah, and Hillsborough Avenue is a whole different street. The speed limit's higher, and the beacons that are being installed, they're actually the solid red. So when the pedestrian pushes the button, those will be a solid red, because there is a big difference in Hillsborough Avenue as compared to Fletcher. So these are not the same type of beacons. These will be, they will turn to a solid red when the pedestrian pushes the button. Yeah, Hillsborough's another animal. That's a 6-lane divided, higher volume, higher speed. The RFBs are not a good countermeasure for there. It's something that's like a hawk. It's effectively a mid-block traffic signal that stops the cars with a red light. That's what's being installed there. There was a comment about we have several mid-block crossings that are located near bus stops, and when drivers stop for the pedestrians, they almost get rear-ended in the mid-block crossings. And those mid-block crossings just have signs. Who do we talk to have further investigation, because they are new crossings? I mean, that's just traffic ops and DOT would be the folks to talk to if you have any issues with mid-block crossings. Again, community traffic safety, CTST is a good avenue for that as well. There's DOT representatives at all those meetings, and that's multiple agencies and citizens go to those as well. You've got enforcement, education, and engineering at those meetings. Yes. Yeah, and you know, the county, DOT, everyone's very responsive to those type of questions if you direct them. Okay, Anthony, any more questions? Traffic ops and DOT. There was just one more comment about polling the audience. I don't know if people want to raise their hands. We can unmute them if anybody has any experience doing similar behavior studies before and afters. In locations where they've done things like this. If anybody wants to share any stories or, you know, any other things, there's just a kind of a comment to see if there's anything that we can learn from other folks that have done this. You know, type into the chat that you'd like to be unmuted, and we can unmute you. Have a two-way conversation. But that is the last question. Is the last question in the chat. From anyone, if you have done any behavioral studies in any education campaigns thereafter. So sure, Anthony, we'd love to hear back from the audience. Looks like we have quite a few people still on the line. Yeah, there's 78 folks that are still logged on. At one point, we had 91, I believe, was the max that we had at one point. Oh, great audience.
Anthony, Anthony, this is Dennis. We've probably averaged 103 to 107 based on our factor added to it, so it's pretty good.
Great. Yeah, that's. And also, again, you know, we hope it was educational and informal, and you have our emails on this slide. So if anyone has questions for us about our campaign, about our research, you're welcome to email us anytime.
Anthony, we can capture these questions and get responses working with Julie and whoever else?
Yes.
Okay.
I see traffic ops in District 7 is still logged on. I can unmute their mic to see if there's
that would be good.
They might be able to put them on the spot. They might be able to answer some of those.
I think Peter and Matt are on. They're in separate spots.
Okay. Put them on. Feel free to put them on the spot. Yeah.
I've unmuted both Matt Weaver and Peter Hsu.
I don't know if either one are there.
Hey guys, Peter, he's on his way back from the ITE meeting, and I've been in and out trying to handle other fires, so
okay.
I'm not going to be very helpful right now.
That's okay. You know, some of those were specific for Hillsborough County engineering, so we would be more than happy to find those exact answers, and we'll have those posted for everyone.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Well, there's no more
Go ahead.
questions.
If there's no more questions in the chat, I'll go ahead and end the recording. We'll stay on the line for a few minutes in case anybody else trickles in with a question or wants to chime in. But with this, I'll end the recording. Thanks, everyone, for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.